Good morning from again another sunny New Forest down here. I've got to say it is sunny today, but it is a bit nippy. And I thought I'd show you another one of the plants which I've got in my garden. This is one that I've put here, I have to say. Now look, I've got to stress at the outside. I'm not Mr. Green Fingers. I'm a very much wildlife gardener, and I've tinkered with the resource that I've got here to try and improve it for wildlife. So let's be clear about that. But I have had some success with this plant, and I'm smiling smugly because it's a species that as a child I really wanted to see, but I didn't get to see until I was much older. I didn't have very many sort of wildflower cravings when I was a kid. It was much more about reptiles, mammals, birds, insects. I didn't really get into botany until I left university, and a friend, Andrew Welsh, actually a top bloke, a brilliant naturalist, fantastic botanist, and I travelled around the UK trying to tick off all of the UK's orchids in one season. And of course that brought us into contact with many other plants. He was far more knowledgeable than I was, and I learned a lot. Thanks, Andy. And that's when I got to see this particular plant. So should we just get on with it? I'm going to show you. I'm so pleased about this, honestly. Right, I'll flip the camera. Look at this. These are Snakeshead fritillaries. Beautiful little plants that grow in wet meadows. And they, oh, hold on, so I'm getting jostled by a poodle. Get down, Nance. They grow in wet meadows. Now, there is some dispute as to whether they are a native species in the UK. I think the consensus is that they're not, that they were at some stage introduced. They weren't recognised in the wild in the UK until, find out. They weren't recognised in the wild until the 1700s, but they were reported in gardens before that. Obviously, like the primrose, is quite resistant to trampling, thank goodness. These I planted here. I bought some bulbs, about £20 they cost. Funny little bulbs, 2-lobed. I made a small hole using a stick, and I popped them into my lawn. And I now, this year, have about 100 of these plants. It's taken about 4 years to go from, I think I bought 25 bulbs, I can't remember, might have been a few more, and I got them up to these numbers. Anyway, what about the name? Well, let's see if I can go in close here. You see those drooping plants, that flowers that haven't properly opened? They're said to look like snake's head, and snakehead was in fact the original name of these plants in those old herbals. They've got a range of other names. They're also called leper, as in the disease, leper's lily, because at that time lepers had a bell which they would ring to identify the fact that they were infected, and the bell was the same shape as these open flowers here. Fantastic things. And of course, yeah, probably again the snake part of it comes from having that checkered pattern on there which looks a bit like scales. The scientific name, Fritillaria meleagris, means, well, the fritillary comes from the Latin for dice box. So again, that checkerboard pattern given its name. And meleagris means spotted like a guinea fowl. Spotted like a guinea fowl. So that's how they get their name. As I say, in the UK, if you do want to see them growing in the wild, there are places you can go. The best sites are in Wiltshire and in Oxfordshire, Magdalen Meadow. They've got them there. There's a great place at Cricklade where at this time of year they can come up in great abundance. They were formerly, prior to the Second World War, when we lost so many of our wildflower meadows, they were formerly picked for the flower trade in vast amounts, and I'm no doubt that led to their rarity as well as the digging up of those wildflower meadows, and they were harvested by local people in these places. But you can still get out and see them, and of course you can buy them online. Every now and again they throw up a white one. I haven't got any white ones amongst my 100 plants this year at all, but typically they do. And they're a species of the lily family. I should have said they're a monocot a monocotyledon. You find them over the rest of Europe, particularly common in Sweden. Seen them there in Sweden, and also in parts of Eastern Europe as well. Fantastic little plant, I've got to say. Much beloved by bumblebees. And yesterday, the sun was shining, and I sort of thought, well, I've got these beautiful plants in the garden. I'll do a bit of photography. So I got the camera out and spent the afternoon lying on the wet grass, trying to avoid the attention of the grazing animals. Can you not step on my fritillaries? For goodness sake, get away, get away. Sid. So, and I lay down and I was taking pictures using my infrared camera. So this is a normal DSLR camera, which I've had converted to infrared. So it takes pictures in black and white, and very often, depending on the lighting, any foliage comes out as being white in the photo. It gives a slightly unusual effect, takes a bit of getting used to, but I wanted to experiment. Typically, my photography is always a bit experimental. I like to try new things, and people use infrared for landscapes. It turns the sky black, and if you've got big puffy white clouds, they look very dramatic. So the plains of the Serengeti have been much photographed in infrared, but I'm going to try it to do insects and smaller plants like these fritillaries. Anyway, whether you think the photographs are any good or not is up to you, but I do think that if you've got a resource in your garden, you can be free to experiment with it. It's still going to be there tomorrow if the poodles don't trample all over it, and you can try again. I mean, if the pictures I did yesterday were a total disaster, I could just bring my conventional DSLR out today and shoot some colour ones. But I've done that in the past already, so let's get down there. Look at that. Look at them. Aren't they? Oh, they're great, aren't they? I do love these. Let's just see how close I can get to see this one here. I'm not sure. There, look at that. These drooping heads. And yesterday, whilst I was lying there were bumblebees buzzing into these. They looked great. So there you go. That's the snake's head fritillaries. What about snakes? Well, this is quite a good time of year to look for reptiles, actually. And the adder, one of our 3 species of snake, the only venomous one that we've got, as you know, has or should be now emerging from hibernation. And this is the mating season. This is the time when the males will pick up the scent of the females and follow them for great distances. And then when they find that female, they'll follow it in parallel, gently licking with their forked tongue her back, going through that process. Now, what happens if 2 males find the same female? Well, you can have conflict. Now, I've got to confess, I've never seen it. I've never seen what they call the dance of the adders. I've watched lots of other clips of that, and you can find them online. If you Google dance of the adders, look on YouTube, you'll see some quite spectacular adder action. So the males find one another, they then compete for the female. Normally the one that's there first wins, I've got to say, as ever. Territory holder always wins is one of the biological mantras. And they pull up alongside one another, and then they'll rise up the front third of their body, and they'll entwine, and it's a wrestling bout. One of the animals is trying to push the other one's head down, and they do this to the point of exhaustion. When the weaker animal finally runs out of puff, as my dad would say, then it retreats and leaves the other animal in accompaniment with the female, and they go on to mate. And the females are oviparous, so they produce the young inside their body. They're hatching from their eggs at the point of birth, typically, and this allows adders to live at relatively northerly latitudes, farther north than we are here, actually further north than the Arctic Circle in Scandinavia, where adders can emerge in springtime and be seen slithering over snow. So a very successful species in terms of its physiology. Sadly, not such a successful species these days. Like so many other things, they're declining. Habitat loss, although they've got a very broad range of habitats they can live in. Cliff tops, sandy heath, woodland edge, hedgerows. But no, they're definitely on the down through that habitat loss of prey, although their choice of prey is quite broad as well. Small mammals, ground nesting birds, even worms on occasion, other reptiles, slow worms, common lizards, those sorts of things. But there's no doubt that the adder is in trouble. But this is the time to look for them because it's still relatively chilly, and you can get up, and if you walk very stealthily around areas where there are adders, look for those little sunspots where they've come out to bask first thing in the morning. The only thing I will say is that if you have small dogs, as I do, you have to be careful with those dogs. Certainly keep them on the lead in any of those areas, because whilst the venom is not particularly toxic to us, it does produce a reaction. With a small dog, being a mammal, that reaction is amplified. As a consequence of that, they can suffer. So make sure you've got your small dogs on a lead if you're in an area where there are adders at this time of year. Okay, just moving swiftly on to finish then. It's time for Skull of the Day, Self-Isolating Bird Club. Let me just untangle it here. Yeah, now this one is a beauty, I've got to tell you. I'll put it on the table. So there's the underside of Skull of the Day, and if I turn it round, there it is in profile, and then the dead giveaway. It's a bit of an easy one today, so if I give you the top down view of that skull, and I can't miss this opportunity of trying to go in close on that particular part of the underside of this bird's skull. Just look at the detail there. Look at the filter on the top edge of that bill. What an extraordinary thing. Yeah, an easy one today. I'm going to get a more difficult one tomorrow. No question of that. Skull of the Day. I'll put photographs of that up online as well, so you can study them, show them to your friends, teach your kids, whatever. So there we are, self-isolating in the New Forest. A little bit of gardening. This is an opportunity, of course, now the weather's nicer, for those of us who are lucky enough to have gardens, to get out into those gardens and do a bit of wildlife gardening. There's still time to plant things. Wildflower meadows can go in March, maybe a little bit late, but you don't want to, put them in too early and then get frosted out. So there's still a chance to plant for this season. The plan, of course, in that instance would be to try and have as much nectar as possible for as long as possible in your garden, to cater for as many species as possible in your garden. And there we are. Okay, tomorrow morning I'm going to be absent at 9 o'clock. I've got a fixed engagement, something else I have to do. So I might have to do this a bit later in the day. And I've got one more plant species I'm really keen to show you that I've got growing here, which I didn't put in myself. It was there naturally. And I'm going to leave you with a poodle doing gardening for me. This is what you get, you see. It's the wildflower patch. And the poodle, yeah, it's just digging trenches through it. Aren't you, Sid? What have you got there? What's in the trench? Damage? Thank you, mate. I don't know. I mean, I've got to walk them now. I'll train them. I've got to train them. I've got to take them out in the woods and train them. Make sure they come back. Make sure they don't disturb anyone. See you tomorrow. Cheers. Bye-bye.